It is certainly way too premature to say that, somebody's having a breakout camp thus far for the Cleveland Browns, or somebody is rising in training camp for the Cleveland Browns. But the good news is, through a couple of practices, some of the things we're hoping to be positive seem to be just, in fact, that positive. We're going to break it down. Browns 3D on the OBR begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate all of you who come to the OBR daily for your favorite Cleveland Browns written content from our fantastic group of writers. And of course, join us every evening here on the OBR streaming network, beginning at 6 o'clock with Browns 3D. Last night, you certainly had some Fred Greetham. You had some Jacob Roche and a guest breaking down some prospect film on the center position. You will have Brad Ward and Casey Kinnaman after us this evening on All Eyes on Cleveland. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR over on Twitch. And go ahead and do yourself a favor. And you know what? Why don't you buy a couple for some friends? Go ahead and go to the OBR.com. Sign up for the VIP package. You will get all the inside information from the insiders. You will get the opportunity to participate in Ask the Insiders. And of course, with all of that, you will get a subscription to Paramount Plus. I mean, two things for one. BOGO, we all live for it. One of the things that really gets difficult with training camp coverage, and I'm not using this opportunity to knock on any reporter there, because first things first, the Browns are working two fields at one time. So there's no way that anybody there is essentially have their eyes on everything. It's just impossible to do. But the problem is, one video may be shown or one quick written tweet may come up on the timeline. And then all of a sudden, it's a 5 alarm fire. But here is, some of the things that I think, and, certainly reaching out late yesterday and today thus far from people who have been boots on the ground, so to speak, in Berea for practices. And this is one where, look, you can have some fun with it. You can put the passing charts up, whatever. Without video content to see the balls, it doesn't necessarily know what exactly is going on. Reporter Cameron Justice, if you don't know Cameron, she's fantastic. She actually had a fantastic cut up of Shedeur Sanders' first day. And I'm not gonna lie to you, there's some promise with some of the video cut ups that you got from Cameron Justice. I mean, it was and it's hard to tell because it was shot at a diagonal angle, but you want me to want to say it was a 18 to 25 yard square out pass. The ball probably traveled the distance of 18 to 25 yards. And Shedeur put it high and away, and the receiver snagged it, was able to turn it upfield. It's a pro throw. It's just absolutely a pro throw. Now, with Andrew Berry speaking today on Thursday with the media, and this was good on somebody to actually ask this question. You weren't going to get a straight answer, certainly, but it was good to ask the question. And it was, is there any way you envision possibly keeping all four quarterbacks on the opening 53-man roster? And there is a lot of spice to this, of course, because Dylan Gabriel nor Shedeur Sanders are going to make it if they are released. You're not going to be able to get them through the waiver wire and get them back on the practice squad. It's not going to happen. The quarterback thirst in the NFL is so real and so legit. There's just no way. Because then I had somebody I was talking with last night, and they were like, well, Shedeur lasted till the 5th round. The drafting of Shedeur Sanders was a whole other set of circumstances. Where Shedeur is now, and just basically picking him up on waivers, there's not many NFL teams that would not be entertained in getting Shedeur Sanders. Gabriel, same thing probably applies. As the guy was a top 100 player. I doubt anybody's going to think after the Browns, if they were to release him, I'm not saying they are, 4 months decided just to release him, that anybody's going to believe that the Browns had a good enough determination on a top 100 selection after 4 months that they would not be in the business for him. So, I guess where this comes down to is whether or not, you would probably keep both Flacco and Kenny Pickett. And for the record, Wednesday's practice, both guys looked pretty crisp, pretty clear, pretty sharp. Too early here, and not enough results yet in on Thursday's practice to give you a straight answer as far as that goes. Now, and then Barry's response to the question of would you keep all four quarterbacks was I could see a scenario where that happened. Now, I'm not for it in any way whatsoever. I understand it's a different set of circumstances, but it's a waste of a roster spot for me. And I've said this before, and I'll continue to say, the Browns do not have their quarterback of the future. They probably don't even know who the quarterback is. Certainly yet for Week 1, have no idea who the quarterback might be by Week 8, who the quarterback's going to be for December and January. They don't have any interest in any of those, and that's why I don't necessarily want any part of keeping all four quarterbacks because if you just don't know right now that Kenny Pickett is a starter, or you just don't know right now that Joe Flacco is the starter, then what's going to change here? And ultimately, what you want to achieve from this season is to have some idea of where Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, one or both, are into possibly becoming some sort of functional, competent quarterback that can be in the NFL 8 to 10 years. There's a reason Joe Flacco is still available. Part of that has to do with, Joe wants to be limited as to where he's playing at this point in his career due to his family. 100% understandable. Kenny Pickett, again, it's not like there was, a line outside of Howie Roseman's office at Eagles headquarters of teams trying to acquire the services of Kenny Pickett. But Shedeur, and this is where my confidence level probably remains high as far as Shedeur Sanders and being around Cleveland, certainly for this season and, probably past that is, because everybody seems to say, oh, well, the Browns aren't giving Shedeur what everybody else is. Shedeur's not getting snaps with the one. Gabriel's getting more snaps than Shedeur. If the Browns were in any way not sure on Shedeur Sanders, he'd probably be getting thrown a little bit more into the deep end. I think they're just, working diligently. You can see some improvements and, certainly that, Shedeur Sanders is had been putting time in. And we all know, obviously, through his social media amount of time that, Shedeur spends throwing the football, the amount of time that Shedeur spends working out. I think there's a lot of aspects of Shedeur's game that he's just trying to tighten up. And, this is something that probably comes from playing for your father as long as Shedeur did. You know, I'm not saying that, Colorado did Shedeur any disservice, but it's nice to maybe get a second eyes on things sometimes. And now here is Shedeur Sanders, certainly working with a new offensive coordinator and all new coaches here as he makes his break into the NFL with the Cleveland Browns. And there might just be certain habits that they preach, certain ways they prefer their guys to do things. And I think what I notice is Shedeur just seems to be a little bit more as far as, his functionality with the ball in his hands. There was a lot of one-handed stuff that Shedeur was doing as far as movement skills, rollouts, that type of stuff when he was at Colorado. It's been a brief sample size to this point, of course, but you can see that Shedeur is trying to, kind of keep things as tight as possible, two hands on the ball. There's two things that are going to come from that. The ball is obviously A, going to get out quicker out of his hands. B, with two hands on the ball, it'll just strengthen the grip until the release point, allowing for better accuracy to hit the ball through tighter windows. And C, it's just ball safety in the NFL. You have to be extremely careful as an NFL quarterback, that you're not running around with the ball in one hand. So I am telling you right now, Shedeur Sanders is playing better than, from what I've seen, than people are leading you to believe. And when will the time come that maybe Shedeur Sanders starts to get a bigger piece of the puzzle? I think it's probably coming sooner rather than later. Because if Shedeur is hitting these throws and hitting some money throws with guys who probably won't even make the Cleveland Browns practice squad, that tells you it's time to start getting Shedeur Sanders some reps with the guys who will actually be part of the Cleveland Browns 53-man roster. So quarterback wise, we're just getting started. And Flacco a little less time yesterday than everybody else. Understandable. Joe's older. Joe doesn't need as many reps. So let's not read it so much into everything. See what you can find for yourself. Digest it, absorb it, make your own opinions. Now, getting to the things that we're hoping are going to start to look good, start off by looking good. The offensive line certainly was one of them. Now, I am telling you right now, I don't know where Dawand Jones's weight is actually at, but we have never seen Dawand Jones more slim in his 2 years with the Cleveland Browns, 2+ years now, I would say. Looked like a whole different guy in some shots yesterday, in videos and certainly in still shots. Discipline. And look, it's not easy when you are 6'9" and you have a wide body frame like Dawand Jones does. I mean, this guy probably is never full. Now, to Jones's credit, he went and realized he needed to get in front of this and he needed to have somebody help him help keep his weight in line. So good on Dawand Jones for that. His body looks fantastic. He looks absolutely fantastic. And the thing with Dawand is you can say 6'9", 355, and there's not any drop in there of like, oh, well, he's a little overweight. We're talking about a guy who right around this time, within this time frame 1 year ago, was well over 4 bills. And certainly the rehab process in his first NFL offseason doesn't look like, Dawand found a way to navigate through that in a positive manner. Yes, he was injured. Yes, he was rehabbing. He wasn't able to work out like he wanted to. Probably, certainly wasn't eating what he should be or eating too much of what he should be. But for now, it really looks like Dawand Jones is committed to this path of, getting this body where it needs to be. And look, there's a golden ticket here for Dawand Jones. When he was originally drafted in the 4th round, I was one of one of the very few who thought there could be a possibility that Dawand Jones could be a left tackle for the Cleveland Browns. He's now getting that opportunity. And again, he doesn't have to be a top 5, a top 10 left tackle in the NFL. But the opportunity is there for him to secure someday a contract extension as a left tackle in the NFL as a starter. That pays. It pays extremely well. It pays extremely well if you're the 15th through 25th left tackle in the NFL. So for Dawand, some really, really positive steps. And you always want to see guys when they get into the league, and it's understandable when you get in the league. Now maybe you have your first taste of some money, real money, and sometimes immaturity shows. For Dawand Jones, this is showing a ton of maturity. We're understanding, the importance of his health, the importance of his weight, the fact that the team is relying on him, the fact that the team is willing to let him have basically the premier offensive line position in the entire NFL, the one that kind of matters the most. And Dawand Jones really seems to be, embracing it and showing a lot of maturity and appreciating the faith that is shown in him from this Cleveland Browns team. So far for Dawand Jones, just from appearance alone, the footwork, the way he's moving around at this lighter weight, it really looks like things are, hopefully, looking that they could go pretty well, certainly for Dawand Jones and obviously for the Browns as they hope to anoint Dawand Jones as their starting left tackle. The offensive line as a whole, though, I mean, just looking at some stuff that you saw, certainly from Wednesday, um, just everybody kind of looks maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit tighter. You have this new offensive line coach. His reputation is certainly for having strong offensive line play. It is for having strong run blocking from his offensive line. Guys were athletic, a lot of pulling, And, the understanding and, probably when the first initial meetings for said new offensive line coach and Joe Batonio and Ethan Posick and all of these guys were, and it's usually kind of goes that way anyway, hey, I'd like everybody to lose a little weight. And it's different with certain positions within football. Offensive linemen, linemen in general, you usually want them to try to come to camp a little bit lighter because the chances is that they may start to put some back on. Now, D-backs, wide receivers, nobody really cares, honestly. There's very few wide receivers and defensive backs who ever have weight issues. So for them, hey, you want to come in, you're a little bit over, trying to get a little stronger. We're going to run that weight off you anyway here in training camp because it's so stinking goddamn hot. But for the offensive line, it certainly looks, and this probably had a lot to do with the conversations early in the offseason that they were going to take this system back to, a much more friendly as a fit phrase I'll use for this offensive line. This is what this offensive line, the majority, this is what they've done most of their entirety in Cleveland. So to go back to it and keep them comfortable certainly thinks like it should allow them to become more successful. Just connecting dots, of course, right? So, even Joel, and you see the excitement in Joel, and you see it from Jack Conklin, guys who are, certainly a little bit older now. And, with offensive linemen, you say, hey, we're going to let you pull and just go knock some guys around like bowling pins. You just get, big, goofy smiles from the offensive linemen. So, and Thursday, you had before practice today you had some positive feedback from Joel Flacco right before practice, speaking. It said, hey, man, if there's one thing I don't think I'm worried about right now, I don't think I'm worried about this offensive line. You know, Joe knows the group, certainly, for the time he was here in 2023. He knows the group. He knows the capabilities of this group. He knows what, they look like when they're good. He knows like what they look like when they're not so good. So for Joe Flacco, to comment on this and look, I know people can say, oh, well, it's just fluff and what he's supposed to say, da 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 da. But I don't think guys sugarcoat things in the league anymore than they used to. The overall, protection of your team and protection of your logo, yeah, it's still there. But, guys nowadays just, tend to be a little bit more truthful than they were back in the day. And everything just was a stock answer back in the day. So certainly a great, great thing as far as, hearing and, positives from Shedeur Sanders, and certainly from the offensive line as, they try to basically relight the lamp as, one of the better offensive line groups within the entirety of the NFL. Certainly one of the other guys I have a lot of anticipation for certainly training camp, preseason games, and of course the 2025 regular season that we've talked about a ton here is Isaiah McGuire. Now, basically, Isaiah McGuire was the one getting first team reps yesterday opposite Myles Garrett. I do find it interesting that, some people seem surprised about this. Even if, McGuire is just your base D end, then technically he's your first string D end. That's who's going to play on 1st and 10. You know, McGuire, and, we've mentioned it a million times, and, his prowess last year, and he was top 5 in the NFL, graded by PFF as far as his ability to stop the run. The pass rush, and this is going to be the thing that's going to be the question for anybody else at the DN position opposite Myles Garrett is, who can make some noise? Who can get in there and get quarterbacks to the ground? This is, it's going to be paramount. And, it's certainly it's a position that's very difficult to get your hands on because they cost a boatload of money in free agency, or you have to spend very high draft capital to acquire them. So, with hopefully a potential development of McGuire, and I have told you guys before, looking at where McGuire was when he came into the league out of Missouri, and you're looking at recent footage, video, still pictures, interviews even of Isaiah McGuire. I don't think Isaiah McGuire looks like he's 265 anymore. And if he is 265, he's a little bit more muscle massed and shredded at the 265 if he's still playing near that weight. If we could maybe get one Browns media member to, try to get a question in, that would be one I would want to ask of Isaiah McGuire is, where is your weight at? Where's your body at compared to when you first got into the league a few years ago? And, hearing what his plan was as far as, whatever transformations he tried to do with his body and what was the ultimate goal of these transformations with your body. My belief is that, Isaiah McGuire tried to do everything he could to get some more athleticism into his body. It was one of the few things that was lacking from his resume during his draft back in 2023. So for McGuire, I'm all in. I really am. I think the breakout is coming. I think we're going to be able to have the conversations during this season that, hey, let's talk about Isaiah McGuire and how he's pretty much become an all-around defensive end in the NFL, which again would be an absolute, just big time W for the Cleveland Browns, where they may have drafted a competent, complete, good against the run, good enough against the pass, starting pass rusher in the fourth round. So there's certainly, some encouraging signs from some guys early in camp. And a lot of times, the guys will tell their own tale. Look, all of these guys have talent. Everybody in the NFL's got talent. There might be one minute thing, one small thing, a weight thing, an injury thing, an uncomfortability within the system thing. There's very small things that could be big things that can hold any professional athlete back from being better at their craft. We've already talked about Jones and the weight, and I think McGuire is really trying to put in some more, athleticism into his game. Shedeur working on, ball security and a little bit more of a different grip as he's maneuvering with the ball in his hands in the pocket. These things, and look, they go on everywhere. So don't act like, I'm just saying, wow, I'm having an epiphany here that, these are just three players from the Browns who are, but this is the difference, putting in the work, improving yourself. And one of the most important things that nobody in the world ever wants to listen to is listening to and accepting the fact that you may have a flaw. Taking a critique, a criticism, and using it as a fuel for improvement. Yes, you may have a coach who never played any drop of big time football in his life, but that does not mean they don't know the proper way for the game to be played. You have to accept the coaching that comes your way. And it really looks like, some of these Browns players, younger Browns players, and that's what matters because these young players are probably what's going to make or break this season. You can get an Isaiah McGuire to step up. You can get a Dawand Jones to step up. You can get a Cedric Tillman to step up. You get a rookie or two to maybe play and perform better earlier than expected. Now, all of a sudden, the opportunity and chance for this season to be better certainly rises, but also it allows for the future of this franchise 2, 3 years down the road to certainly rise as well. The Joel Batonios of the world ain't going to be around forever. The Posicks, the Tellers, the Conklins, the Shelby Harrises of the world. It's just not going to be the case. Some of these younger guys are going to have to start to cement themselves as legit pieces here for the Cleveland Browns. One of those guys who did it last year and has basically shown no signs of slowing down anytime soon is certainly wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. And this is where, things could get a little bit difficult for Jerry, as, you know, the weeks and months come. If other guys within the passing game, and David Njoku is back at practice today. As we all know, David Njoku just recently lost his father No official word was given, but the assumption would be that David Njoku was not around on Wednesday due to, of course, the passing of his father. But if the Njokus of the world and the Tillmans of the world and the Deontay Johnsons of the world and the Thrashes and the Fannin and the running backs can't contribute, then all of a sudden you've got yourself Jerry Jeudy basically being mobbed like a boy band guy from the 90s trying to get out of the airport. But Jerry Jeudy thus far certainly looking the part. This is a quick one I wanted to go through. Mike Clay, ESPN Fantasy. As you guys know, I do an episode every year based off of Mike's player projections for the Cleveland Browns. It's just always a great tool, and it's always just a fun episode. One of the more fun episodes I certainly get to do it in the off season. But basically, from a fantasy perspective, this is people that he's looking at NFL rosters and trying to find who will not be making the roster that they currently on. Quarterback, first one, top of the list, Kenny Pickett. Quarterback, Jake Hayner. Quarterback, Stinson Bennett. Quarterback, Dorian Thompson Robinson. So just imagine that. Pickett was traded for Dorian Thompson Robinson. Everybody had so much stuff to say. But if you ask Mike Clay from over at ESPN, he believes that neither one of them is going to make the team that they were traded to. Running backs that he thinks will be available, and this is certainly an interesting one, obviously, with the Quinshon Judkins situation. Cordarrelle Patterson, no thank you. Alex Madison, I'm listening, from Miami Dolphins. Dameon Pierce from Houston, I'm listening. And the ironic thing is I'm pretty sure Dameon Pierce was selected with one of the Deshaun Watson picks. Dameon Pierce runs like a hammer. And the other thing is Dameon Pierce can return kicks as well. So Dameon Pierce certainly could have value. Emmanuel Wilson from Green Bay certainly got some run last year. Cam Akers, who's currently with the Saints. I'm in. Yeah, you guys know, if there was a chance they were in Tallahassee playing for Florida State, I'm interested. The Vegas Raiders, Dylan Laub. But I mean, of this list of guys who could be available, Dameon Pierce for me, Alex Madison, and certainly Cam Akers do have some appeal for me. Jake Bobo, wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, was kind of phased out after, kind of stepping up, which is weird because right now I'm not sure exactly how the whole landscape of the Seahawks wide receiver room is. And, they look as Bobo as could be a guy on the way out. Here are two from the same team, and I will tell you right now, I would claim them both, and I'd probably run somebody out of here, some guys out of here from the Cleveland Browns wide receiver room. Wide receiver Jalen Polk and wide receiver Javon Baker. Neither had much of a role last year with the New England Patriots. Polk, I loved all three of those guys coming out of Washington. Javon Baker was fantastic coming out of Central Florida. I've mentioned these guys. I've highlighted these guys. These are guys that I would be on the phone with right now if I was Andrew Berry. I would be on the phone right now with the New England Patriots trying to get my hands on these guys. And even if it's a day 3 selection, whatever, what do you need to let me take you off his hands? But you want to tell me you want to find maybe Andrew Berry's next wide receiver heist acquisition, Jalen Polk from New England, formerly of Washington. Go get it done. Go snipe the Patriots on him. Tight ends, nothing really spectacular. Jelani Woods was a fantastic draft prospect coming out of Virginia. Obviously been injured most of his career. And from the Philadelphia Eagles, Keelan Granson and old friend Harrison Bryant. So we talked about Shedeur Sanders, and we cannot believe everything that we hear or the single cut-ups that we see. Dig deeper. Wait for people. Just because the people are putting their stuff out so quickly doesn't mean it's necessarily the whole package. So keep your eye on that. Shedeur Sanders, for me, starting to maybe look like the noise and him creating it within Browns camp is coming. Browns offensive line looks good to this point. Dawand Jones, just looking at him alone, could be in line for a really, really solid season. And always roster tinkering, and certainly some names that we could have envisioned becoming part of this 2025 Cleveland Browns team. As always, we appreciate everybody comes out to the OBR.com for the written content every day. While you're there, check into the VIP package. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. You get all the insider information, ask the analysts, all of Lane Atkins' musings, and of course, a free subscription to Paramount Plus. Again, win, win, win. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on Twitch. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.